Okay, good morning, everyone, and anyone who may be joining us online as well. And we're continuing the series through the book of Genesis. And this morning we are going to look at what does it mean to say that we have been created in the image of God. In Latin, it is known as the imago Dei, image of God. And it says that God created us in his image. So why don't we have a word of prayer? Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for bringing us together once again. We come knowing that you are waiting for us with wisdom and knowledge that we need for the living of these days. And for that, we give you thanks. May you be present in our speaking, but even more so in our listening. For we ask it through our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Hi, Leslie. All righty. So without further ado, let us listen to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26.
Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Genesis 2.
All righty. Questions, comments, and conundrums?
Is this anti-ecology?
Say again, please.
Is this anti-ecology?
In what sense?
Well, we've got control. Do we have responsibility for the existence of the birds, the animals?
So it's interesting. If you look at verse 28, it says, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it
Exactly.
and have dominion over." And you could make the argument that everything in creation is subservient to us. What we have to understand, though, is that back then, creation was much more intimidating to people than it is today. And life was very fragile. And so the whole attitude toward creation was one of actually fear in some respects. And so this is Genesis' way of saying, don't worry, you're going to have control over it. The other thing that I find rather troubling here is we're not supposed to eat filet mignon or lobster.
I know.
I'm doomed because we're supposed to be vegetarians. Look at verse 28. Okay, so it says, after having dominion over this, blah 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 blah, over. Okay, and verse 29. And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food." Okay. All right.
28 says, and have dominion over the fish.
Dominion
Yeah,
like food.
yeah. But dominion doesn't mean you get to eat them.
That's
Means
right.
you're in charge of
Yeah,
them.
if I want.
If you're going to go strictly by what Genesis says,
Dominion, doesn't dominion mean that I control them?
You're sovereign over them.
well, not necessarily. I mean, you have royalty and they had dominions, but it didn't mean they got to eat their subjects or their animals or
Yes.
anything.
What does dominion mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. What does dominion mean?
I just looked it up. It said control or sovereignty.
Yeah.
Okay, control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
Yeah.
no more than tip herrings for breakfast.
Same as a traffic cop, they have control.
pardon me?
Same as a traffic cop, they have control.
A traffic cop has control. Yep.
There is a limit to that control.
And it means that the traffic cop, that's actually probably a good analogy. The traffic cop has control and it is his or her job to make sure things are flowing in an orderly fashion. Okay. And
Not only do you not get to eat filet mignon,
yeah,
but you don't even get to eat potatoes because they're a tuber and they don't eat seed.
don't even get to eat potatoes.
No, see,
But there's seed.
No french fries.
Oh, it's interesting. Yeah, I did notice that I did notice it said both times have plant that have seeds and fruit that have seeds. Yep. Well, actually, no.
So what about pineapple?
Oh, no.
Pineapple, they lost it out of pineapple,
Yeah.
they stick it in the ground and it grows.
But potatoes do have seeds. Okay. And funny little story. My father lived with me for almost 4 years. And actually, I knew this before he moved in. He did not like potato skins. Did not like potato skins. We'd go out to eat and he would say, do the French fries have skins on them? Yes, I don't want them. Well, do the mashed potatoes have skins on them? No, I don't want them. Okay. And finally, I asked him one day, I said, Dad, why don't you like this potato skins? That's where all the nutrients are. And he grew up in northern Maine, a lot of potato farms up there. And so he told me that the seed for a potato is actually the eyes of the potato. And what they would do is they would cut those eyes out and they'd stick the eyes in cow manure. So my father always associated the skins of the potato with the manure.
Oh.
And I was,
That's like the corn being planted with a dead fish.
Right.
Same idea.
yeah. So I understand Dominion has some interpretation, some wiggle room, but I think that's superseded by the next verses. He doesn't say you can have the fish. He's very clear. You shall have plants that have seeds and fruit that have seeds for fruit. And now then the question is, well, okay, so why do we have meat and such today? And by the way, notice that the animals are all vegetarian too. Okay, where does it say? And to verse 30, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for fruit. And it was so.
Oh.
So in the beginning of creation, everything was plant-based. Now, the belief is that when we fell from grace, symbolized in the story of Adam and Eve, that's when we started to move beyond plants to filet mignon and lobster tails and all of that, and the animals as well. And interestingly enough, if you go to the book of Isaiah, and it talks about the peaceable kingdom in the world to come, once again, everything is plant-based. So, so I guess what I'm saying here is I'm kind of glad we fell from grace.
Yes.
Yeah. This is why I believe Seventh-day Adventists, many of them, will not eat meat.
Oh.
Yep. So
I was intrigued by the very first line, and thanks to
very first line.
very first line of 26, and thanks to the Quest Bible, it said, "Let us
Oh.
make make man. And the commentary in there said that told me that I should remember that the Hebrew word for God, Elohim, is plural. And
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
and that they said that this is a reference in a way, the hint of God and the Trinity.
Oh, God and the Trinity?
And so another way that Father, Son, and Holy Ghost had a discussion about creating man.
Okay, so we actually talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I gave a couple of interpretations that I was aware of, and one was the heavenly court and God's talking to the seraphim and everything.
Yes.
The other interpretation that I've always heard of is God is using the royal we. You know, we have decided. But this is another interesting reference.
And I thought that was an interesting commentary. And of course, I remember in that wonderful series of the English department store, Are We Being Served, where Mrs. I can't think of her name, was always saying, when they asked her opinion, we have decided and we are unanimous in it.
Yeah.
And she was speaking solely for herself.
Right.
But she always spoke in the regal plural.
You know, but I like that. We let us make God in our image as possibly a reference to the Trinity, which would be not welcome among Jehovah's Witnesses because they do not accept the Trinity.
Do you know if Jewish people believe that when the Messiah comes,
Mhm.
he will be like a god or just a really great
No, he's
prophet or whatever?
going to be a really great prophet.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you would
it's-
think if their word for God is plural, that she's a whole.
Oh,
other
interesting.
theory, right? Because our theory is being Christian, believing in the Trinity, it kind of makes sense for their word for God to be plural, because we
Right.
Right. So
now know God and Father, Son, and
Right,
Holy Ghost.
right,
But
right.
if they think it's just one
So
entity, whatever you want to say, then it kind of goes against their own word.
yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, Leslie, is that we can use the Christian Trinitarian explanation for the use of us here, but it doesn't cut it in Judaism, where they don't have a belief in the Trinity and they don't see the Messiah as being divine in any way. So if we looking for a Jewish explanation for why the use of us, it has to be something different.
Now, didn't I'm gonna mispronounce his name, Melicanizer,
No, I know what you're referring
you know,
to.
the Canaanite.
The Amalekites.
The Canaanite priest,
Oh, Melchizedek.
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 And he respected God as almost in a pantheon as the principal God, didn't he?
I would have to go back and check. So when Abraham gets to the promised land, Melchizedek is a high priest who comes out and welcomes him and blesses him. And I would have to check, Tom, about what you're saying. But I will also say that Melchizedek figures prominently in the Protestant rite of ordination, okay? Because in the Catholic Church, you are ordained through what is known as the apostolic succession. So Jesus gave Peter the keys to the kingdom, and then Peter passes it on to each subsequent pope. And so then when you're ordained in the Catholic Church, the cardinal who ordained you, okay, gets the authority and the ability to pass on the charismatic gifts of ordination, tracing back through the popes all the way to Peter. And so when Protestants broke from the Catholic Church, the argument was, well, your ministry isn't valid because you've broken apostolic succession. In other words, you weren't ordained via the apostolic succession back to Peter. And so the Protestant reformers made a connection with this high priest Melchizedek. So in the Protestant tradition, we are ordained after the order of Melchizedek. Yes, Don?
What I'm hearing, the history is relevant. I guess what I'm hearing is we spend our time in our religious beliefs trying to justify God to man, or trying to have man live along to what we believe are God's orders, ways, and commands and history.
Yeah.
But we have a great difficulty in separating them. In other words, we try to make God man. If you
Oh,
will.
yeah. We try to create God in our image.
Right. It's a total reversal of what the reality should be.
Yep. I'm going to get back to that. Yes, Jane?
Let us make man in our image.
Amen. What does it mean to be made in the image of God? And that's going to be the focus of the Sunday sermon and also this Bible study. And Dawn, I would say that you were absolutely right. We have a danger of trying to make God in our image rather than the other way around. I'll give you an example. I was thinking about this morning. What did Archie Bunker, how did Archie Bunker refer to God? Oh, called him the man upstairs.
Oh, the man upstairs, that's right.
The man upstairs. Okay, that's creating God in our image. Yes, Jack.
It's a different look at it in our own image. Some people, including myself, feel that God is something great.
Mm-hmm.
To be made in His image scares me.
It's an awesome responsibility to be said that we have been made in God's image.
And that we've changed, and a lot of people feel like Don, that they're the boss, we are the boss, not God.
No, it's an.
You don't feel that way, but.
Oh, gosh, no.
No.
It's such a blatant thing in all of the discussions. That's why I referenced it, because a lot of the things we're comparing are in the, how much is God like man? And it isn't that way. It is the exact opposite. Plus, that the other part that I'm sure is going to come up is we look at things in a physical way because God made all the tangible things that are us and the world that we live in.
So does it?
But that doesn't mean God is what we know of as our physical.
Okay. So does that mean when it says we've been created in God's image that God has 2 arms, a nose, and 2 eyes?
No, I think it means we have an ability to, we have a better ability to reason at a higher level than any other.
But a higher level of what?
The reason, I don't know. Reasoning,
Brains? Okay. But
I mean, there's
what
some
about-
very smart creatures out there, but it's just that.
Yeah. Yes.
Something.
Yes, Jane.
Spiritual, we have a higher level of spiritual.
Okay, we have a higher level of spiritual development.
Right, we have in a way of God's own image, we have an ability in part to understand both righteousness and holiness. I mean, ours it's not perfect like God's, but we have an ability to approach it, appreciate it, and understand it, and participate in it in our own limited fashion, which God has a unbelievably magnitude ability to.
Okay.
I was just at the zoo yesterday. A friend of mine and I took up our other friend with Alzheimer's to the little zoo in Stoneham, and they have monkeys. And I mean, when they stand up, I just said to my friend, how could anyone kill a monkey?
Okay.
I mean, they look so much like us, but there's something missing
Yeah.
from a monkey that we have.
Right. Yeah. And what the geneticists, I think that's the way to pronounce it. They say that we have something, we share 97.8% of our genes in common with monkeys and gorillas. Okay, so it must be that 2.4% that makes the difference. But you see what we're doing here? We're doing exactly what we said isn't right when we said that, because we have two hands and a nose and two eyes, that must be what it means to be made in the image of God. In other words, all the examples of what you're saying it means to be created in the image of God, you're starting with us and moving that way. And really, if we want to understand what it means to be made in the image of God, we have to start with God and work this way. And this is why, and I think I said this last week, why I've always loved that scene at the burning bush, where God gives Moses his marching orders. And Moses says, well, wait a minute, if I go to the Israelites and say, I'm going to bring you out of slavery, and they're going to say, well, who told you to do that? And he said, I need to know, I have to tell them who sent me. So he's basically saying, who are you? And God replies with what is known as the tetragrammaton, the 4 letters. Those 4 letters in Hebrew translate into English as I am who I am, or I will be who I will be. It's YWHW, which Yahweh.
I don't know the other word you just said, but we always refer to it as the Popeye verse.
Yeah, the Popeye verse. Yes, I am what I am. Yes, and but it's really, see, in ancient times, names had a lot more power, significance than they do today. Okay, and if you had a life-changing event, your name was often changed. So Jacob, remember when he wrestles with the angel? Okay, and the angel says, let me go, for the day is dawning. And Jacob says, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And one of the things the angel then says is, no more shall you be called Jacob, you shall be called Israel, because you have striven with God and man and have prevailed. Israel, the Hebrew word in English, means he who wrestles with God. So he had this life-changing event. His name was changed.
What does image mean in this situation?
Say again, please.
What does image mean?
Image. What does image mean? So it's a likeness. It means that there's something about God that we share. And, just to wrap up the burning bush, when God says, I am who I am, he's basically saying to Moses, you're trying to put me in a little box here, okay? And again, names had significance, and I'll give you an example of that. You're walking down a street in Boston, and you hear somebody say, hey, can you spare $1? I need to get a cup of coffee, okay? You might give them the $1, you might keep walking. But what happens if you're walking down the street of Boston and someone says, hey, Jack, can you give me $1 for a cup of coffee? Are you going to be much more likely to stop? Because they know your name, okay?
Actually, I've done studies, and the most effective, fire alarm system for in your home is one that would say your child's name.
Oh, say your child's name?
I don't know if they ever made them, but I thought like a study, if you could be
Tom, yeah, because it gets your attention.
When he's 8 years old, and he's will wake him up by the name.
Yeah, names are very important. Yep. Do you know what the most important thing is when someone who's new to the church comes a second Sunday? To remember the name.
Yeah.
To remember the name. Okay, that is so important. So Moses is trying to get some leverage over God by getting God to reveal God's name. But God basically says, I am who I am. In other words, don't you try to define me and put me in a box. I'll tell you who I am. Okay. And so the same thing is true when it comes to being made in the image of God. So often we start with ourselves and say, well, I can do this. I've got a mind. So, it must mean that God's intelligent. When really what we need to do is we need to start with God and say, okay, what is it about God that is true for us and only us? Okay. Is there any other creature that is said to be in the image of God? No. Human beings are the only ones who are said to be made in the image of God. So this has to be something that we possess that is not true for any other living thing. And so when we look at it that way, I go to 1 John, where it says the simplest definition of God. God is love. Okay, so we have this ability to love, but it isn't just an everyday run-of-the-mill kind of love. It's a special kind of love. And so, how would you define the special kind of love?
Love is agape.
It's agape, exactly, Jane. We're talking about agape. Agape is the Greek word for a sacrificial love, a love that is able to make sacrifices for others. So at the Last Supper, when Jesus says, greater love hath no man than this, that he laid down his life for his friends, okay? He's talking about an agape love. And Jesus proved that he wasn't just all talk, because the next day he went out and he suffered on the cross. That is agape love. And I believe that is what it means when it says we have been created in the image of God. We have the ability for agape love.
In some current times, in our studies of nature, animals, biology, and all these wonderful programs that are out there, you have situations where a predator comes in. It points out that the parent of a young animal will try and protect that animal. To
Okay.
their own detriment and sacrifice
So
their own
this
life. But more than that, the elephants, when one of them dies, they stay there for a length of time. Afterwards. These are emotions, if you will,
Yep. So
that raise questions about how do we look at this.
okay,
I
so
would say that there's also like dogs that will go into a burning building and try to like save their owner.
yep, okay, all right. So if what you're saying is true, then that can't be what it means to say that we've been created in the image of God, because you're giving me examples of animals that make sacrifices. For example, John, you mentioned the mother.
Yeah, a mother animal protecting.
Mother animal protecting. And this was actually in the news just the other day. A woman out in Yellowstone was attacked and killed. And what they realized as they were investigating is they could tell by the tracks that it was most likely a mother bear with a cub. Okay. And I remember when I did Outward Bound in Alaska, you were told as you were walking along trails to make noise. Okay. Because the last thing you want to do is come around a bend and startle a mother bear with a cub.
We had a bear spray and a whistle.
Yep, bear spray.
Make noise.
Okay.
We were trying to talk, like not what we usually do.
Yeah.
We
So-
gotta be quiet.
Yep. So this woman probably came across this mother bear and her cub, startled them, and the mother attacked because she was protecting her young. One of you mentioned a dog running into a burning building to save its master. And is that agape love?
Sacrificial. Well, the dog.
My answer is no, it isn't.
I think the dog one is.
My-
I think the young is.
Why isn't it?
What do you think it is?
Instinct. So in order for it to be agape love, you have to have the ability to say, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay. So when a mother bear attacks someone, okay, does that bear have the ability to say, no, I'm not going to do that? No, she's doing it out of instinct. Okay.
I think my dog Buddy would have said, there's no way I'm going.
So you had a dog that said there's no way.
That
but-
was really
but here's-
scary, and I don't do scary.
Yeah, go ahead, Don.
So when we train first responders, are we training them to instinct rather than true love?
I'll give you an example to that. It immediately came to mind. Okay, so use the example of first responders. And no, it isn't instinct. We're not training them to so they don't have a choice. And this also was in the news. Marjorie Stoneham High School down in Florida. The officer who, the police officer or the school officer who was there that day did not immediately go in. And the argument was if he had responded, they could have saved probably about 10 lives. Okay. But he didn't. He called 911, but then he went somewhere where he could be safe. Okay. So clearly he did not respond in a way that demonstrated agape love. Okay. He had a choice. Okay.
I mean, they do have to make a choice, because sometimes the building's just too far gone, and they have to say, you just can't go in.
Right.
You know?
Here's another reason why I don't think that animals can truly exhibit agape love. And I'm going to say agape love with a capital A, which is the ultimate sacrifice. Okay. A dog runs into the house and, gets burned up, gets trapped. Okay. In order for it to be true agape love, you have to have a conscious understanding of the reality and the finality of death. And animals do not have that. I know animals know about sickness and all of that, and they respond when someone passes away, but they don't have a formed understanding of the permanency of death. And so in that respect, I don't think it can be agape.
Can we go back to something you
Sure.
just said offhand a little while ago, and that was.
Those offhanded ones get me in trouble all the time.
No, it was really good, I thought. It was something about, like, not us, like, trying to make God like us,
Right.
but you said, like, there's a little
We
bit.
have to start with
there's a little
God.
bit of God
Mhm.
in all of us. And I was just thinking, like, that should, like, impel everyone to, like, it's kind of a big responsibility. And so many people don't even want to, like, acknowledge that
So-
might even be something inside. They're like, I'm
So
sure.
that's
You know, if there's like God in you, then that should, like you were saying, it's kind of scary. It should be like an awesome thing.
exactly.
Well, God,
And that's the point that I want to drive home in the sermon, is that to be created in the image of God, and by the way, I'm going to say that to be created in the image of God does not mean that we have a little bit of God in us, okay? Because in the Judeo-Christian tradition, there is a firm differentiation between creator and created. Okay, we can be like God, but we do not have a bit of God in us, because, and that's what got Jesus in trouble. Okay, because he was saying he was God's son. So he was saying that there was that
he was God.
that part of him had God in him. Okay, and by the way, this was a big debate in the early church in the Nicene Creed, where it says, Jesus Christ, God of God, true God of true God, light of light. I don't remember the exact wording. And then it says that Jesus was begotten, not made. Okay. The significance there is, okay, if I make something, okay, that different. Okay. So in other words, you may see a little bit of my blood, sweat, and tears in something that I made, but that doesn't have a part of me in it. Okay, so there's a difference when you say made. You're focusing on the line between creator and created, but when you say begotten, that means that there is that some of the creator is in the created. Okay, so. Yep, absolutely. Jesus was begotten, not made. And so, yes, to be created in the image of God is an amazing thing. It's a huge honor, but it's also incredibly humbling. And I think you're absolutely right, Leslie. How much of a difference would it make in people's lives and in our world if we took that proclamation to heart. You know, I have been created in the image of God. Do you know what that means?
That means you have a responsibility.
Yeah,
Yeah, and an overwhelming responsibility in a way.
right. But it's not a burdensome responsibility.
No.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. When you, and I'm talking in generalities here, when you make a loving sacrifice of some kind, how do you usually feel? You feel good, right? Yeah. You know why? Because you're being true to who you really are. You're being true to the reality that you have been created in God. Like, I mean, you are living into your destiny when you exhibit agape love. Now, that doesn't mean that you do agape love 100% of the time. In fact, there are times when agape love is not going to be a good thing. Okay, so a parent whose kid is always getting into trouble and it's always the teacher's fault or it's always society's fault. Okay, you may think that's agape love, but it isn't. You know, agape love. I'll give you another example. Agape love is when a parent says, "No, you can't do that," and the kid says, "I hate you." That's agape love. You're risking the love back because you know what's best for the child.
It's also like without love, you are nothing.
That's right. Without love, we're nothing. And, you know, the problem in our society is that we have too much, we have too much eros and not enough agape. Eros is the Greek word for a selfish, give me kind of love. Okay. So when I say I love chocolate, that can be an eros kind of love. It's a give me. Okay. And yeah. Yep. This is my chocolate.
Satan will give you the chocolate.
Okay. I may use this example in the sermon, and you know, there's two extremes of the spectrum of love, and actually in the Greek language there are 7 different words that are translated as love, and they all refer to different kinds of love. We only have that one word in
Yeah,
English
it's too
language,
bad.
isn't it?
Could use some more.
Yeah. So in between, there's philios. Okay, it's a French kind of love. You know this word. That's right. If I were to say which American city is known as the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia comes from philios, Greek word for brotherly love, friendship love, and Delphi is the Greek word for city. Philos, Delphi, Philadelphia. Okay, so you have these two different extremes, and the reality is, guess what? We have the ability for all of these different kinds of love. So, you know, being agape is something that just doesn't come naturally. You have to work on it. All right. And as an example of the two extremes, I may use this in the sermon. I was thinking about this. So many years ago, I stopped at a little convenience store over in Wakefield. And when I came out, I got into my car and I looked in the rearview mirror, and it was a small little, like there's a laundromat and a convenience store. So there's only like 8 spaces there. And so as I was getting ready to back out, I discovered that somebody had parked directly behind me. So I couldn't get out. And as I'm thinking, you know, who would do something like that? And this elderly guy, I saw him out of my corner of the eye. He says, "Hold on." And he goes into the convenience store. And I thought, oh, good for him. He's going to go find out who parked behind me and let him know that I need to get out. So like a couple minutes later, he comes out again. He waves. I think, okay. He gets into the car behind me and pulls out. So in other words, he knew I couldn't get out. But that didn't matter to him because all that mattered was what he wanted in that convenience store. And I could just sit there until he was done with what he wanted to do. That is eros. That's a selfish kind of love. And we have that ability too. No, I did not. No, I was not in a handicap space. Yes, Don?
And that was yours because you just couldn't wait a couple minutes.
Yeah, I suppose. I suppose you could look at it both ways. I could have been patient.
When we take that phrase, made man in our image,
Mhm.
made in the image of God, from God's viewpoint, saying he's making man. From our viewpoint, we look back, which is what we're trying to reverse that, look from God's viewpoint and work down. And I think the answer to our question, what does it mean to be made in God's image, is we don't know. I think that's the
Well-
honest answer to it, is we are searching for it, and that's healthy. I think the search is a
Okay.
healthy thing. But I think the answer is an inconclusive answer. My example for that, when we talk about love, I'm gonna go back to one of the things I had before. When you have a funeral and the people go by and
Yep.
view the grandchild who goes by and looks at grandma there, and then the next day says, when is grandma coming?
When's grandma? Yep.
There's an interesting, because they don't understand that transition to death, which
Okay.
is what you brought up
Right.
earlier.
Right.
And your comment was that animals don't understand that. And my question on that is, then why is the elephant staying around for a while when one dies, grieving for it in that
Grieving?
instance, but not going back later on?
But, okay, yes, the elephants are staying around the one that dies because they're grieving, okay?
For days.
They're not ready to let go, okay? But that's not agape love. Now, don't shoot me, because I don't mean this as a put down. I just mean it as a different way of looking at it. Grieving really is
Selfish.
a me emotion, okay? Think about it. The person who's dead, okay, there are a couple of possibilities, okay? Either they've gone to be with the Lord, and so we should be happy for them, or they've gone to that other place, which means they were a stinker in the first place, so why am I grieving for him or her? Grieving is a me emotion, and I'm not saying it's wrong, okay, but it's not about, it's about your relationship with the other person, but it's about what I have lost, okay? It's not an emotion that's based upon, oh, the poor person, you know. It's a me emotion.
But they have a big parade in New Orleans. And,
Yeah, that's right. In New Orleans, they have a big parade.
yeah.
Yep, they have the Dixieland band as you go to the cemetery, because you're celebrating that the person has gone to what we say is a better place. Yep. So so that's how I would look at the example that you just gave, Don. It's grief is really a me emotion.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Sometimes people wish to have a celebration of their life before they have the funeral.
Yes.
Before the guy dies,
Yeah.
they want to
I
have
hate
a
to miss a
celebration.
party, I'm all for it.
Yeah, have a party. Yeah.
Yeah, while he's living.
Yep,
All his
yep.
friends gather and everything.
Mhm.
That's not selfish.
Yeah. No, I don't see that as, because the person is there, and what you're doing is you're celebrating your relationship with the person. And, you know, notice that we don't use the word funeral anymore. How many times in the obituaries does it say there will be a gathering for a celebration of the person's life?
Yeah.
You know, it's in some respects, it's almost a denial of death,
Yes.
you know?
You know,
Uh,
when you do a sermon,
Yeah.
somebody dies,
Yep.
it just, I was thinking about that.
Uh-huh.
That, how do you're talking to the family,
Mm-hmm.
and do you talk about the person that passed and died, or how great they were, or do you concentrate on the family, where they're suffering or whatever,
Mhm.
they need grieving?
Yeah.
And they need
So when
to
you
hear something that helps them.
hmm So when I do a funeral, it isn't either or, it's both and. Okay, you're celebrating the person's life, you're celebrating the relationship, but most of all, you're celebrating the promise of a life to come. So you know, grief, it's necessary. I tell people that I want all of my goodbyes in life to be painful. Because if it's easy to say goodbye, it means the time together really didn't mean anything. So the fact that it's painful is really a reflection of the special relationship that you had with someone. The other thing that I always say is that tears are the last gift we can give someone we love. Okay, and what was it that Jesus did when he went to the tomb of Lazarus? Jesus wept. Jesus wept, shortest verse in the Bible. And, that was a gift. That was a gift to not so much Lazarus, but to all the people that were there. Because when they saw him weeping, do you remember what they said? See how he loved him. Okay? And so, grief is a me emotion, but it doesn't mean it's bad. Okay? There are times where you do have to put yourself first. There are times where you need to be a little selfish. The problem is in our society, the balance between agape, philos, and eros has gotten way skewed out. Okay, way out of balance, and I think that's why. And actually, I'm starting the sermon with the question, "Who am I?" That's one of life's fundamental questions, and I just connected a couple dots in that. I'm willing to bet you that people who are struggling with the question, "Who am I?" their lives have become too skilted toward eros and me kind of love. And they're finding something's missing, okay? There's something missing is what you experience in those moments of agape love. So.
Or possibly they just weren't raised.
Say again, please.
Possible too, they just weren't like raised in a faith and they
one.
have a feeling there's
Sure.
something
Sure.
more out there, but they haven't figured it out yet.
And they weren't raised in faith. And that is why the Jeopardy illustration I used in last Sunday's sermon is so sad and scary, because it raises the possibility that you don't have a relationship with God. And just so everybody who may be watching knows, on Jeopardy a month ago, the $200 clue, which means it's one of the simplest questions on the show, was Matthew chapter 6, verse 9 says, "Our Father who art in heaven, blank be thy name." And as we proved Sunday, everybody in that sanctuary knew the answer, "Hallowed be thy name." But on this particular Jeopardy show, not one of the three contestants knew the answer. And that's sad and it's scary because it says they don't have a relationship or they don't have a very deep relationship with God. And they're cheating themselves out. And I think that when you're skewed, when the scale is so skewed toward eros, that's when you end up saying, "Who am I?"
And I think it was probably in there just because, that prayer is just out, and even if you're not Christian, like it's in movies,
Oh, sure.
you've been to somebody's wedding and they've had, it's just like they
Right.
say it, when presidents get inaugurated,
Yeah.
like if you've been paying like any attention to the world at all,
Yeah.
chances are you've heard it, and even
Yeah.
if you're,
You don't have to be a
Muslim or something, you've
Yeah.
still heard it, so it's just like,
Yeah.
I don't think they put in some really tough scripture on things
Yeah.
like the Bible verse column or whatever.
Yeah. But
It's just like amazing.
Yeah.
Just none of them had
none of them had a clue.
I can see them start, sometimes like something real well, and it's like a word later on, you can start at the beginning.
Yeah.
But you think they hell,
Yeah.
Sorry.
By the way, also, when this happened, Twitter exploded with comments and everything. The best one was this woman said, they said, "Oh, come on now, even my atheist boyfriend knows the answer to that question."
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That, it's really hard.
Even if you're not religious, it's a part of the culture.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why I was,
The question, who am I? Those people who don't ask the question, there's a couple, there's to be a positive and a negative side to that, if you will, or
Okay.
good or bad side.
Positive
The
and a
bad side
negative.
is they're too busy and wrapped up in themselves,
Which
to
is
ask the question even. The other side, which is the good side, is they're too busy wrapped up in caring for other people to ask the question. They already know who they are. They're applying.
Okay, some people don't ask the question because they know who they are. Yeah, and
Well, I think it's a part of.
Positively no, and negatively.
positively.
I think it's a part of growing up. I mean, we all have to, when we start maturing, have to ask,
Who am I?
like, who am I gonna be? Like,
Uh-huh.
who am I?
Right.
Am I the kind of person that is, you know,
Right.
gonna keep going to church like
Yeah.
I was raised? Am I the person
But-
that's gonna, you know, do
Right, but-
whatever, you know?
It is a part of growing up. You ask yourself, who am I? And it's a question you ask yourself, from time to time. But what I'm talking about is the question, who am I? And it's being asked by a person who, say, is a partner in a law firm and has, a private yacht and all of these accomplishments and everything. And they say, who am I? Who am I really? And that's the person whose scale has gotten out of whack. It's so eros focused. And if you want to know who you really are at the core of your being, it's this agape. And it's when we live into that agape, and we said it already, when you exhibit agape, you feel good. Okay? You feel good because you're doing something good, but you're also being true to who you really are and who you were really created to be. And that's why being able to answer the question, what does it mean to be made in the image of God, is so important.
Well, I guess you have to be careful. Like, I think what you're saying is you don't lose yourself in a career or even a hobby or
Yep.
whatever it might be. Keep somewhat, I mean, obviously it's all right to work hard, but that shouldn't be like the whole of you.
Right.
Or to be passionate about some thing that you like to do on the side.
But even being
that
passionate about
take-
something can
take
get you in trouble.
over That's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
like, even if it's not work, it could be like a
Right.
cause or a
Right.
hobby or something like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Now, what about people who are quote unquote non-Christian, don't have a connection with the church,
Mhm.
but who are raising their family with Christian values,
Christian values, okay.
but they don't.
They don't practice their faith. Mhm.
What do you say about that?
So my response to the people who, and how we see this being played out into today's society is people will say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Okay, I believe in a higher power, I believe in a God, and I believe in right and wrong and everything like that. But my concern there is that, you need to come and be with others who are on the same path with you. That's part of recharging your spiritual batteries, which I was talking about this past Sunday. But in addition to that, and I just lost my train of thought. Part of what being here on Sunday morning also is understanding I'm not all that. In other words, if you're just walking your spiritual path by yourself, okay, it can almost make you be and feel more important than you really are.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Don.
There's a word for this called humility.
Right.
And really, if one has humility, what in our relationship to God, whether we're Christian or not, in our relationship to ourselves of where we are, our perspective is, no matter what we do, is just one simple question that Christians use: not my will, but thy will be done.
Yeah, thy will be done, right. And that's I think also part of learning the agape, is that it isn't what I want. And so there are good people out there, but I guess what I would say is the losing out on the sense of community, and in some respects are they cheating themselves, and in some respects is it a cop-out? Okay, in other words, it's so easy for me to be spiritual. I can go and walk in the woods when I want, but I don't have to take any responsibility and demand. It's not demanding.
I was
Sometimes.
thinking too that I think maybe it was Paul said to somebody in one of the letters, like like test something, like if you wanna know what like the right thing is, like test it against the scriptures.
Yep.
So it's probably easy to be, good and just being spiritual.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
things are like going easy, but
Here-
if
here's-
it's like a tough thing that comes up.
Right.
And like, how do you know what's the right thing to do?
How do you know if
you don't know what's in the Bible?
That's right. How do you know it's the right thing to do if you don't really know your Bible? And this really helps me in this sense because I think one of the dangers between being spiritual is it can nurture that sense of I'm in charge. Okay,
That's why you need that.
I'm in charge. Whereas being religious and practicing your faith, you realize, no, I'm not in charge. God is in charge, and it's God's will be done, not my will be done. And so that's one of the potential pitfalls, I think, of going the spiritual route.
I will
Well,
say though too, that, not all fellowshipping is created equal. So there's some places you could go that maybe you would go, if that's your good choice. Not just staying home and being spiritual if they're spewing hate from the pulpit or, like, we love people, but not those people kind of
Right,
stuff. But
right.
if it's really a welcoming,
Yep.
place, then
Yeah.
I really missed fellowship.
I couldn't just be spiritual because I know what I'd be missing out on. I'd be missing out on the sense of community. There's something about being with other people on that journey, and knowing that what happens to me matters to people who are on the journey with me, and matters to the God who put us on this journey. So I thank you all. A lot of good conversation today. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Oh, me.